And how are we all doing, Panther Nation? We are one sleep away from the 22nd rendition of one of the greatest rivalries in South Florida, the Shula Bowl, between FIU football and FAU football. Miami, Boca Raton. The 305 versus 954, I think. I don't know. From the heart of the Miami to the college that prides themselves on being really close to a beach. It's the Panthers and the Owls, Kevin. And it's extra exciting because with the stakes being what they are for both teams entering into this very early matchup in the season, this is going to be one of the biggest games for both squads. And obviously, you factor in it's a rivalry game. There's a lot at stake for this game. I am so freaking excited.
Yeah, mixed two of us. I'm pumped. Obviously, you got to go Paws up, baby. Yes, just such a big rivalry, And honestly, you could even make the case, Jake, and you would know this more than I would. Just hasn't really felt like one recently.
Right.
FIU's currently on a 6-game winning streak with this rivalry. FIU has yet to beat them since 2016, and we're going to be there at the in Boca Raton. They just haven't won there since 2012, so. I wouldn't say we have the chance to see history, but we definitely have the chance to see a renewal of this rivalry, which we haven't seen in the last, couple of years. And we didn't get this last year. It would have been Boca, and then this year would have been at FIU. But we get the chance to cover our first ever FIU football away game. I think the same goes to you.
Sick.
We're pumped. We're going to be there, and I can't wait. This is definitely feels like it'll be a lot closer than anticipated. I know we said the same thing the last time around this game came around and FIU lost 52-7, but I think I truly mean it that this team is definitely different. And these are the guys that Coach Mack wants under his helm. And I am very excited to watch this game on Saturday night. I mean, we're recording this on Tuesday. I want it to be Saturday already, man.
I want it to be Saturday too so badly. This could be just an absolute cinematic masterpiece that we're going to see between FIU and FAU, especially because now we have a good idea of what this FIU team can look like at their best. And we've also seen what FAU can look like at their worst with how they lost to both Michigan State and Army to begin their season. But before we get into the real meat and potatoes of this preview, we do have to talk about FIU's win against Central Michigan. First things first. Kevin, I know you got your pit bull pins. I would say that the inaugural game at Pitbull Stadium, both on the field, was a massive success. The crowd was bumping, the music was fire, and FIU came out and had one of the best defensive performances I've ever seen the Panthers have in a football game, as they flat out abused the Chippewas. I mean, we'll talk about the defense in a second. Kevin, leading up to that game, you were really adamant that changes needed to be made for FIU's offensive line. And to that end, it felt like they greatly improved their ability to give Kewan Jenkins enough time in the pocket. I believe he was only sacked once in that game. What did they do differently?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you have to look at, obviously, is just their improvement in the offensive line. I mean, just going from 4 sacks to 1 sack. But I think the other big thing to keep in mind is just how good they were at blocking and just how much more cleaner the game was for them. I'm searching at the box score to make sure I say this correctly, but I think it was about 105 yards of rushing for the offense in total. So definitely very good to see. Yeah, so it was 309 yards of total offense, but 185 yards of offense. Yes. So, I mean, they gave Kewan time enough to earn Conference USA Player of the Week on the offensive side of things, first time in his career. So, yeah, FAU has definitely struggled with the run game. They've struggled to get to the quarterback, I believe. So this is definitely a very good opportunity for FIU to capitalize on their strong performance on the offensive line. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be a constant by any means, but definitely worth noting how good they were this last game and the adjustments that they did make. Coach Mack also mentioned that they finally had Ben Schellenbach back, so that allowed them to rotate a little bit more, something that allows them to kind of to not play in this Florida heat like crazy, and not cause any fatigue. And honestly, that's going to go to both teams this time around in the Shula Bowl this upcoming Saturday. So I'm not going to say that FIU is the advantage by any means, but in terms of just where they're playing, because they're playing pretty similar spots. But Yeah, FIU's offensive line looked really good. Travis Burke, someone who really struggled week one, came back week two and looked really good. Yeah, got to give it to them. Everything really worked. They were very well coached, and just hope it goes into this week against FAU.
Yeah. And on the topic of offense, I think for the most part with this FIU squad and how they performed, there was not one single player on their offense, either running back, tight end, or wide receiver, that had an absolutely amazing game per se, but everyone contributed in either one or two plays. Everyone had at least one great play that helped this team score as many points as they did. You had players like Luby Maurice Jr., for example, get a rushing touchdown, which was surprising to see. Eric Rivers caught a great pass again to the end zone. And of course, it was beautiful to see, Lexington Joseph get his first touchdown since 2022. I felt like this was all around an amazing performance for this FIU offense. Statistically, you might not be able to tell that because most players have tame overall stats, but everyone contributed.
Yeah, and I think a big reason of that too was just the great field positioning that the defense did give them, where
True.
you really couldn't find any excuse to mess it up, which honestly they didn't. I think they had over 30 points off of these turnovers. Most of the points did come off of the turnovers, including the pick six with Brian Blades, who ended up being Pro Football Focus's top-rated cornerback of the week. So I don't think we've seen an FIU player up there for a very long time. And on top of that, got to give credit to Jovan DeWitt, the defensive coordinator, who also earned 247 Sports
Kudos to him.
conference coordinator of the week. So another thing we haven't seen in a while there. Honestly, could have even said David Yost deserved to be out there too. But yeah, got to give credit to the offense where it's due. Jake, you could probably note this too. I mean, in 2019, there wasn't a clear guy on this team,
No.
clear offensive weapon. Maybe I don't know if Devontae Price was still there back then, but maybe him. But still, I mean, you kind of look at that team and see some similarities where there isn't a very clear top-notch guy. There's just a lot of players that provide you a lot of different things, and you're able to use it on the field. And it worked out for FIU against Central Michigan, and you kind of hope it works out against FAU.
The hunt for the wide receiver one continues for this FIU.
Hey, and honestly, you don't even need to have a wide receiver.
You don't.
People guys who are able to get the rock and just move it well, which we've seen. We've seen a Desmond Washington. We've seen a Dean Patterson, Nana Burris, Eric Rivers. Those are all guys who on other teams could easily be a wide receiver one or a wide receiver two. But you don't need to have a wide receiver one necessarily by any means. I mean, we all thought Dean Patterson was going to be the wide receiver one, and that's not been the case just based off of who's getting the more targets. I mean, and you don't necessarily need to be a wide receiver one. He just has a lot more experience than the rest. And, he gave great perspective today, for example, in the Shula Bowl. So it's a good veteran presence to have, but you don't necessarily need to have that wide receiver one. And we've seen that with past FIU teams, obviously not under Coach Mack, because when you go to Tyrese and then you have Chris Mitchell, it's a little hard to just all of a sudden have multiple guys. But for once, I think for the first time since honestly maybe 2021 or 2019, definitely feels like they have multiple guys at the helm at wide receiver that you could rely on, and they've been able to do that. Unfortunately, at the tight end position, you're going to have to rely on it a little bit more, just given the absence of Rocky Beers.
Yeah.
But, that's another position they're going to use more, and that's not going to be a wide receiver one by any means or a tight end one. You're just going to have another option there that you didn't have really in years past.
Yeah, so let's talk about that defense, and I want to bring up Joe Labus's stat line. He went 20 for 39, 151 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 great passing touchdowns, I will say. They looked good. But 5 interceptions thrown in a single game. That's the most amount of picks this FIU defense has come away with since 2005, ironically, when they dismantled FAU. I mean, Jamal Potts, the amount of players, and it wasn't like one player had like 2 or 3 picks. So many different defenders got picks that game. It was absolutely insane. This was, like I said at the top, one of the best defensive performances I have seen from this FIU squad, maybe ever. I mean, I don't know. They've looked great against FCS teams, of course, in years past. However, this was against a fellow group of 5 opponent from the MAC. I mean, that had a really great game in week 1 where they went over 60 points. So combine all those factors in, FIU's defense was damn near perfect.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think, we were talking about in the preview how they lost Reggie Peterson, that they would see a big hit. And honestly, no offense to Reggie, this defense probably looked the best it's looked like, and as he said, in years. It's been something different. I mean, you kind of look at who led the team in tackles. Travion Barnes, who took over for Reggie with 13 total tackles, 8 solo. Then you spoke a little bit about Jamal Potts. Then you have your safety, CJ Christian. Not too far below, you also have not Dwight Newton, JoJo Evans. Keegan Davis had a sack. So did Potts. So they've found multiple guys that have been able to help them. And again, there's no clear guy like we saw last year with Donovan Manuel. It's a lot of really good guys and a lot of really good returners. So have to feel really good where you're at with the team right now. And honestly, if they beat FAU, you have a really good shot at making a bowl game.
Alrighty then. It's time to talk about FIU and FAU, the rivalry of South Florida. Now, all right.
Yeah!
Yes, I know, Kevin. Yes.
Let's go!
I know. Let's go. But we need to talk a bit for a sec about the rivalry itself, okay? I mean, EA Sports, if you play College Football 25, you'll see they note about it. It's a rivalry. It's the Shula Bowl. So here's the thing. Both campuses, FIU and FAU, they're like 55 miles apart. It's about an hour away if you go on I-95 or the Turnpike. Both play. I mean, the players that go to FIU and FAU, they likely were friends, teammates in high school, right? Maybe even in Pee Wee football, they knew each other. They crossed paths, and then now they're at different colleges. FAU, both football programs, very young, right? FAU began playing football in 2001. They were independent. FIU began in 2002. They were also independent. And so when you're independent, all of your games are pretty much non-conference games. So you have to schedule, you have to like come to agreements with other teams around the country and form these games on your schedule. FIU and FAU did that in 2002 because it makes a lot of sense considering their proximity. So they agreed to play at Pro Player Stadium, is what it was called. Obviously, Hard Rock Stadium nowadays. 10,000 fans showed up to that game. It was a final score of 31-21 for FAU, but obviously that was the first of what began as a blooming rivalry. When both teams moved to the Sun Belt in 2005, then they moved to Conference USA in 2013. That rivalry never went away. It was when FAU bailed to the American and FIU stayed in Conference USA that we actually had our first season where it didn't happen. And now, thankfully, it's back. It's called the Shula Bowl, right? It's named after the head coach, the late head coach of the Miami Dolphins, Don Shula. Both schools' head coaches had links to Shula when they first began play. For FAU, it was Coach Howard Schnellenberger. He was a former assistant coach to Shula in the 70s. He was part of the two Super Bowls that the Dolphins have won in 72 and 73. He was an offensive coordinator not long after. For FIU, it was Don Strock, right? He was a backup quarterback. He backed up both Greasy and Marino, both Hall of Famers, and then he was also part of that Super Bowl VIII squad in 1973. So the winner of the Shula Bowl gets a trophy. It has like a wood carving and has the helmets of both teams engraved on it. And to piggyback off of that, we saw something at the press conference. It was a empty trophy case that was brand new. I saw it. We both saw it following the end of the Central Michigan game at the post-game presser. It was just sitting there. And now, as you can see, it's all lit up and displayed. Kevin, what did Coach and the players say about that?
It's motivation. I mean, Coach Mack mentioned that he had the rivalry when he was at Colorado versus Colorado State. They would also play for a trophy, which they had a case for. They did not have a case for the Shula Bowl trophy. And as you could read in the quote, he mentioned that there just wasn't really a need for it. They haven't won this game in 6 years. Why would they have one? But Coach Mack said he wanted the case. He wants to put it there so they know that they have not won the Shula Bowl in over 6 years. Dean Patterson remembers that game in 2021. We spoke to Reggie about that game, unfortunately not on the team anymore, but he mentioned the coaching staff quit on them midway through the game and just allowed them to go out and do whatever. So, yeah, I mean, that was definitely a game, and that's something that they won't forget. I don't think Dean Patterson, I don't think Flex Joseph is going to forget that. These are two guys who take the game very seriously, especially this rivalry. They know they were taught about the rivalry. Every player was taught about this rivalry for both teams. And that trophy is literally in the meeting room. You walk in, you will see it. You walk out, you will see it. You have to pass by to walk in or out of that meeting room. So that trophy's there for that trophy case is there for a reason. And honestly, they hope there's a trophy in there by Monday.
And let's provide some context for a second here. This is going to be the 22nd meeting, right? in the past 21 meetings, FIU has lost 6 straight. 6 games of work before their last win in the series, which came all the way back in October of 2016 when they won by a score of 33-31 in then obviously the Ricardo Silva Stadium. Their last victory on the road was, I believe, 2012, Kevin, in Boca Raton, 34-24. Last season, FAU went 4-8. It was obviously their first year in the American Athletic Conference. Then they didn't do all that great. They had a 3-5 conference record. Their 4 wins came against, ironically, Monmouth, who FIU will take on next week. Tulsa, South Florida. However, South Florida is really good now. So, I mean, kind of funny how the tables have turned. And then Charlotte. But I guess everyone kind of just gangs up on Charlotte, man. Rough for them. So far this season, FAU has lost to both Michigan State. However, I think we're both in agreement that that was a game that FAU had a good chance of winning, but they just didn't. And then they let Army run for over 400 yards on them in Boca Raton. They lost that by a score of 24-7. I want to circle back, Kevin, to some comments made by both Kewan Jenkins and Lexington Joseph following that Central Michigan game. When asked about the rivalry, Jenkins said that he doesn't think it is. And when we asked the same thing to Flex, he said it absolutely is. I think the response from Kewan stems to the fact that, kind of like how you had mentioned, in order for a rivalry to stay a rivalry, it needs to be competitive. And for FIU's case, it has been that way in 6 long years. And obviously, Kewan, he's just grand spanking new to this team. He doesn't see it as a rivalry. Maybe that's the exact reason. Maybe he has something else, but that's how he sees it. And obviously, Flex, he's played against FAU before. He's probably yelled and laughed and cried with the players on both squads before about this game. So I understand there are two differences, but what's your take on that situation? I know it's a bulletin board material for the Owls.
Yeah, I mean, I know where Kewan's coming from. You know, you kind of, and this is kind of what I was, asking today to Dean Patterson, who believes this is a rivalry. He said this is a rivalry point blank,
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with him. This is a rivalry point blank. I know the results haven't been what you wanted, but I think in this age of college football now, rivalries are a good thing. They're going to bring more fans. They're going to bring more traction to your team.
True.
FIU is going to have a target on their back with this Pitbull Stadium thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this rivalry game is going to be fun. I mean, you're going to play in Pitbull Stadium against FAU next year. I mean, if FIU is coming off the win, they'll have the trophy there, and you're hoping that,
you keep it.
You get to keep the trophy in Miami. So you just have to, I see where Kewan's coming from 100%. I mean, you have the rival. He was, I think, noting the rivalry of Michigan and Ohio State. That that's a legitimate conference rival. I know where he's coming from with that because once upon a time, FIU was a rival of FAU in the conference.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's not the case, but there's still a lot of rivalries in college football that aren't lying in conferences. I know Notre Dame has their rivals with Ohio State. I'm pretty sure they're pretty big rivals. They played last year. That was a great game. I mean, you got to look at what some of these rivals end up being. I'm pretty sure USF and UCF are pretty big rivals too.
Yeah.
UF and Miami, they're not in the same conference yet. They're still rivals. I mean, you're playing an in-state opponent. I mean, I think that should be considered a rivalry. Again, I see where Kewan's coming from, but definitely disagreed with the take where you're not rivals just because you're not in the same conference. I mean, there's a lot of teams that aren't in the same conference that are rivals. I mean, FIU and FAU will be playing each other every single year as if they're a conference opponent. Army and Navy were not in the same conference for a very long time until this year, and they are rivals. I mean, now this game is it's still not going to be a conference game, but still, I mean, those are rivals. Last time I checked, the college football game, they goes there every year for a reason. Not saying college football game is coming to Miami or FAU, but that's a rivalry.
Miami has historic rivalries against teams like Florida, who they took on earlier this season, as well as Notre Dame.
That's in the ACC, though, but yes, you're right.
Well, kind of. It's weird with Notre Dame, but you also have, like I said, Florida from the SEC. You have Catholics versus convicts. There's such great history in that between Miami and Notre Dame. Regardless, it is cool to see that the rivalry is going to stick around at least for a few more years. They take on FAU in 2025, 2026, and 2027. I'm assuming they might renew that the years after. We'll have to obviously wait and see what happens then in the future. But No, I think it's an important rivalry. You get bragging rights. Obviously, like I said, off campus, you're probably going to run into these players, and you'll be like, "Hey, we kicked your ass," or "Hey, we won a really close one against you guys."
Not even that. I mean, you're playing for a trophy. I mean,
I
there's
know.
there's the I-10 Bowl, I think is what it's called,
It's
between
something you can always
Stadium.
look at as you walk to and from conferences at the field house. It's something you'll
Hey, man,
always
you
have
never
your eye
know.
on.
This rivalry renews itself to what we know it was once. Maybe FIU goes to the Athletic.
Yeah. If you look at that trophy case and there's a trophy in it, you're going to feel proud about it. And if you look at that trophy case and you don't see it in there, you're going to be pissed about it. And obviously carry that into the next matchup in the following season. So, I mean, I'm an old head, 2022 graduate. I've seen my fair share of FIU, FAU games. It's always something that you mark on the schedule. You have the mindset of, all right, even if the season doesn't go your way, at least if you can knock off FAU or vice versa, FAU to FIU, it's going to be a win, a small win in the grand scheme of things, but it's going to be a win. You can ask, Miami and Florida State the same thing, and they would tell you that if their season goes down the drain, they can at least say they beat the other team, and they'll be okay with that. So,
And for Mac, if he wins this right now, that would be his signature win with FIU. I
statement
mean,
win, yeah.
you can't think of another game. You will say Central Michigan was the most complete game. North Texas was a very good game. FAU would be the biggest win of his career. I mean, at FIU, obviously,
I agree.
he's beat some very good teams, but that would be the biggest win for him at FIU. And who knows?
And they're catching FAU with their pants down. As far as actually going out and doing that, beating the Owls, this is going to be one of their best opportunities in a very long time. FAU is reeling from two devastating losses, one of which is a game they should have won, and another is a game that they had no chance of winning against a conference rival. Granted, a brand new conference rival, but still. Let's briefly touch on FAU and our thoughts so far. You have Fancher, who is their leading passer and rusher, which is a bit interesting. However, he has not had a game where he has really stood out as being not just one of the top quarterbacks in the American, but the quarterback that FAU can rely on for the rest of the season. What's your take on him?
Yeah, Cam Fancher is definitely an interesting quarterback. I mean, a lot of similarities to Kejuan Jenkins. Good arm, extends plays, pretty fast. I mean, we saw him going to work against Michigan State where he ran for over 100 yards, and then we saw the struggles against Army. But Army's team is so weird and so different from what we usually see in a normal scheme. But yeah, I like Fancher. Marshall transfer. He actually played FIU once in 2021. Didn't start, but definitely got into the back half of the game. I think just completed one pass for 3 yards, something like that. But yeah, he's a solid quarterback. Definitely knows what he's doing. I think this is a good opportunity for him to kind of go, kind of take it to the next level and finally get those struggles out of the way. But he's going to have to work, man, because this FIU team knows what it's like to play against a dual threat quarterback in Kejuan. So, I mean, and FIU played against dual threat quarterbacks almost all of last year. Pavia, Salter. You had the North Texas quarterback. I mean, it was not an easy stretch for FIU against these quarterbacks. I think they'll be a lot more prepared this time around, though. And when you have Fancher, I'm not sure who Monmouth has, but then La Tech, I mean, you have Jack Turner, so that's a different type of quarterback. Right now, FIU's kind of gotten pretty lucky not facing these dual threat type of quarterbacks. I mean, Fancher will be the first.
They're coming.
And probably the next one will probably be Salter, and that's maybe about it, honestly.
Maybe about it. But they are coming. Yeah. So, alrighty then. On that awkward transition, let's get into our guest for today's Paws Up preview. It is none other than Robbie LaStella of the FAU Owls Nest, diving into his thoughts on the game, his thoughts on the Owls so far this season, and his expectations for what we could see on Saturday. So let's hear what he has to say. And hello, everybody. We hope you're enjoying our episode of the Paws Up preview so far. It's time to talk about our rivals in the 22nd edition of the Shula Bowl, the FAU Owls. So I'd like to welcome into the show Robbie LaStella of FAU Owls Nest. Robbie, how are you doing over in Broward County? Actually, not even is it Broward County? I lose track of Boca Raton so much. But how is it over there?
It's close. It's right on the border, but no, I haven't. I haven't lived in Broward County. I haven't gone south. I live in Delray, just a town north. But doing good. I'm excited. I'm a fan of the FAU FIU rivalry. I see the people on social media trying to move aside and go to USF. It's important. Regional rivalries are important. They can have a rivalry with USF. They can also have a rivalry with FIU and have some more history behind it. So I think it's great, and I'm looking forward to another edition of it.
Let's talk about FAU. The season has not gone their way so far. They played a very proud game, I would say, against Michigan State to kick off the season, ultimately losing that 16-10. But then they kind of just dropped the ball against Army, giving up over 400 rushing yards, lose 24-7. Robbie, I want to ask you, what were your aspirations for this FAU squad entering the season, and how have they, I would assume, let you down so far?
Yeah, well, coming into the season, I definitely thought it would have been more of a fast start. I mean, I wasn't saying they were going to go beat Michigan State or Army. Both those games were difficult, but I thought offensively it would have looked a little bit better than it has. In terms of overall season projections, I have my high was with 8, and my low was with 6. So that's still attainable. 8 will be hard. They'll have to win some tough games, but I think it's been surprising to see the offense not click. When you bring in players in today's day and age, all over the place, FAU has tons of new starters everywhere on the offensive side of the ball, and it just hasn't gelled yet the way that they thought it would, that I thought it would. I was out there a decent portion of summer, and it just, there was a sense around the building that, the culture has shifted. There was bad vibes in the Willie Taggart era, and so last year was kind of that first year, and now it was kind of, supposed to push into the new era. And through the first 2 games, it's been, even against Michigan State, that offense struggled a lot, and it's not all necessarily to blame on the quarterback. We'll talk about all that, but it's just been surprising that the offense has struggled as much as it has. The defense has, although the 400 yards against Army was very, very surprising. We'll trust Tom Herman that was a bit of an anomaly against a rush front or a rushing style that you're not going to face again, because they did well against the typical rushing front in Michigan State, and then they faced the option, and it all goes down the drain. So that's a bit concerning. But the DBs against Michigan State were really solid. We saw Aiden Childs go out against Maryland the following week and throw for 350 yards. FAU held him to 115. So that's been on par. The defense was definitely going to be the strength, but the offense, it has struggled immensely through the first 2 games.
I want to talk about the head coach of FAU, Tom Herman. It's his second year with the program. Last season, not the greatest beginning to his tenure with FAU. They went 4-8, and now obviously 0-2 to start this season so far. What would you make so far of Herman's short but under 500 tenure with the Owls?
Yeah, well, it's definitely, knowing Tom Herman, that it's been a frustrating start for him. He comes in from Texas and Houston and previously Ohio State, and all he did there was win, and he even won at Texas. Those standards there are crazy high, so it wasn't enough. But 4-10 through the first 14 games is a bit of a struggle, and so that has been a little bit surprising. But instant success in today's landscape, especially at the G5 level, is hard in football. It is. And so, Rome wasn't going to be built in a day. Year 1 was what it was. You lose your starting quarterback early in the season, and Daniel Richardson comes in. You go with your backup quarterback and you compete. It wasn't pretty at times, but you beat USF, which was something to hang your hat on that season. And so the offseason was, in my opinion, really solid. The vibes around the program were high. He went in, he had a solid high school recruiting class, attacked the portal. And so it just hasn't clicked on the field in year 2 yet, but it's not out of the cards for it to come together. I think Herman has definitely brought in a new culture, which was something that was wanted. Things when the Willie Taggart era didn't go good at all, both off the field and on the field. So now that's something that Herman's been focused on, is kind of rebuilding that culture. And it's definitely, different. I didn't cover Willie Taggart's era, but the last 2 games of his last season. So I won't speak too much as exactly what was going on but it just seems like a good football culture that he's building. But you want to see the success has to come. I mean, it does. And success at FAU is not Texas. It's a bowl game, at least to start. 6 wins is what the fan base really just wants to get back to seeing. And so this year, I thought that was attainable. I still think it is attainable. But that's something that, the Tom Herman regime probably would want to get in year 2 to kind of keep things on track. Willie Taggart was done in 3 years. FAU, it seems like they kind of operate on a 3-year basis with coaches. So if this year were to go south, next year would kind of be do or die. So overall, I've been pleased with the Tom Herman era in terms of off the field, building a program, bringing in coaches. I love his staff. But with anything, you want to see that on-field success come. I think it will. Just hasn't come as quickly as I guess some may have thought.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about let's sort of dive into the Owls now and the actual roster, starting off with their quarterback, Cam Fancher, right? He comes in, a transfer from Marshall, had put up all right stats with the Thundering Herd. However, through 2 games of work so far for FAU, he has put up 309 passing yards. And he's also the leading rusher, funnily enough, with 77 as well. However, two passing touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He's also been sacked 7 times, which isn't a good outlook to see from the starting quarterback. What do you make of Fancher so far? And if you think that he's going to be the guy that'll lead this Owl squad through the rest of the season?
It's been tough to tell because it's just not been pretty passing the ball, putting it blatantly. You lose your potentially number 1 receiver to go 2 weeks before the season in BJ Alexander. So that hurts. EJ Horton, who comes in from West Virginia, played with him at Marshall. He's going to be another outside guy. He's been out since the end of fall camp. So that puts him at a little bit of a disadvantage passing it. I will say that. But at times, there's been a lack of separation for receivers. Cam's missed a couple throws. It's just, it hasn't clicked. That's about the only way I can really describe it is it just hasn't clicked yet in terms of passing the ball. I think it's 2 of 8 on passes attempted of 20 yards or longer. And so it's tough to kind of pinpoint the reasons why. Like I said, there's been a few inaccurate throws, but there's also just been kind of a lack of playmakers. And so that's been concerning. And Cam's not coming in here to throw for 3,000 something yards and set the record in the passing books. He's a very capable passer, but his best strength is as a runner. We saw that against Michigan State, although it got a little bit out of hand with the way he was getting hit. The slides were not being executed properly. Took some pretty dangerous hits, but he did pick up 10 first downs with his legs in that one, and that doesn't even include the ones he got with penalties. And so that's something that's important to me. He's able to do that with his legs, but then against Army, he only rushes it 4 total times. So there was obviously an emphasis to protect him, but they dialed that back a lot in week 2, and so it's kind of left me a bit confused as what we're to expect with Fancher, because he's not the most prototypical pocket passer, but they had him a lot more in the pocket last week. The passing numbers didn't jump up as much. It looked a little bit better. He had more time than he did against Michigan State, but that's to be expected because he's facing Army's defensive front and not Michigan State's. So this week against FIU, it's another week where I'm kind of trying to see where is that passing side of it? Because we know what he can do against Michigan State. We saw the running game. We know he can do that. It'll probably be dialed back, but I still think they'll amp it up a little bit more than 4 carries. But where is the passing game going to come in? How they've rolled him out a lot. They haven't found a ton of success doing that. They've rotated receivers, so I'm just a bit curious to see kind of what they do in this one to kind of jolt his passing game up, because he's if you watch his tape at Marshall, he's definitely a capable passer, but they just haven't had the plays, the playmaking to kind of put these passing plays together, and it's been pretty ugly to watch.
It seems at the moment Omari Hayes looks to be the wide receiver 1 for FAU. However, obviously, when you only put up so many points against Army and Michigan State for that matter, it's tough to decipher who's going to be some of the top stars in the offense because you have yet to see FAU break out in a game offensively. So who are some of the names from the receiving core that FIU fans should be wary of when we enter Paradise on Saturday?
Yeah, I would tend to say Omari. As you see the stat line, he's popped off out of the slot there, which is in a Tom Herman offense. That's typically where they look. Although Charlie Fry is offensive coordinator, his slot is always it was LaJohntay Wester last year, and Omari Hayes steps into that role this year, and he's looked good when he's played. But what's been surprising a little bit with Omari is last week against Army, he played the 6th most snaps out of the 7 wide receivers who played. So he's had the most production, but it hasn't replicated in playing time yet. So obviously the coaching staff is high on him, but they're also high on the other guys that they rotate in. Jay-Sean Platt on the outside had a touchdown against Michigan State. He's got a ton of speed. He's got that size that you want on the outside to go up and make some plays. There hasn't been many opportunities, whether that's him not getting open, the pass protection. It's still undetermined. But they threw him a jump ball against Army. It was intercepted. So they're definitely he's a target deep. That's somebody potentially. On the other side, it's been a little bit of a mix. Marlon Johnson's rotated in. He's a big 6'4" receiver from Buffalo. He's more of your possession catch kind of guy. I don't necessarily know how much he'll stretch the field, but he's definitely a chain mover to target. Okay. In the past, it's been the tight end position. Zeke Moore was a red zone threat last year as a redshirt freshman. This year, the tight end position hasn't been utilized at all. So don't necessarily know where that's going to be built in, but at some point, I imagine they're going to attempt to try to get the tight ends involved because that room is talented. But really, it's been Omari Hayes, it's been Jay-Sean Platt, it's been Marlon Johnson. Joe Young is a sleeper name to kind of watch rotate in there on the outside. Okay. He caught a deep bomb against I think it went for about 20 against Army. That was about the really biggest highlight of that game offensively besides the touchdown pass. So he was really good in summer camp. He's a JUCO transfer. I like his story. He's a really good person, so I'm rooting for him. But he's another guy that could come in and potentially make an impact. But it's tough to say because they rotate a lot at wide receiver. They played 7 deep. And Omari had 19 snaps as the number 6 guy. So they're playing those guys as much as they can, and it's kind of tough to kind of pinpoint. Like I said, I would say Omari, but he doesn't play all the time. So
let's transition now over to the defense, starting with that defensive line. How much would you say you guys are missing Evan Anderson on that defensive line? It feels like that Army game really exploited a lot of issues that this group might have. And how do you see them handling the run against FIU? Do you think they've already brushed off some of those errors they made against Army? Obviously, Army prides themselves on having a phenomenal running game. I'd say FIU's is all right, but how do you think they'll handle the Panthers' running attack?
Well, FIU, they've got it looked like they had multiple running backs getting carries along with Keone. So that's going to be tough to stop, just like Army rotates in their guys as well. So it's going to be tough. And you mentioned Evan Anderson. That's a big loss. And coming into the season, they attacked that really well, I thought. It clicked against Michigan State. They brought in Bryce Langston from LSU. They had Jaden Wheeler, Jacob Merrifield in there, Devontae Davis, who comes in from Jackson State. Those 4 guys all rotate in the interior, and it didn't work against Army. The Army was – but to be fair for the interior guys where Evan played – Army really made their bread and butter against FAU on the outside. When they got to the outside, they had plus blockers every time, and it was gain of 10 plus, a lot. And so, they got gashed in the interior a pretty fair amount, but that game against Army was it looked to be a little bit more on the edge in the linebacking group more than the interior, but it was really an all-around struggle. This game it's going to be a battle. I mentioned, I think those running backs for FIU are talented. I think their ability to rotate is also key because as FAU brings in fresh legs on their side, FIU can as well. And so It's gonna come down to really what Tom Herman said was, they were comfortable against Michigan State, and that Army defensive front was a different beast. That's how he described it coming into the week, and it looked like that on the field. And so maybe it's true, and maybe they're perfectly fine against normal rushing attacks, and the Army just threw them for a loop. We shall see. But I'm very interested to see how this one goes, and if that Michigan State game was them stepping up to the test, or if run defense is potentially an issue.
Alrighty then, we'll start to close up shop here, Robbie. Again, thank you so much for talking some FAU Owls with us. I'll leave you with a pretty straightforward question. FAU will win this game because they did blank.
They ran the ball with their running backs. That has been the biggest issue outside of passing the ball. I believe CJ had about 9 carries for 18 yards against Army. He's the lead back right now besides Zuberi Mobley. There's been no run game for FAU, period, the end, outside of Fancher in that first one against Michigan State. But against Army, he wasn't even running. I think he picked up 1 first down on a scramble. But outside of that, there has been no setting up. There's been no getting in manageable situations. And that for this offense right now that's struggling to pass the ball, that's a killer. If you're not able to run the ball and kind of set things up a little bit, then everything else in the offense is going to get exploited. Yeah. The lack at wide receiver, the struggle to pass the ball, the struggle in pass protection. But if you're able to run the ball consistently, you can kind of play into the other maybe not most best parts of the offense, but utilize them sparingly alongside the run, which FAU was able to do last year. They had Larry McCamm and Kobe Lewis rotate with Zuberi Mobley. This year to start, it's just been there hasn't been much of a run game for FAU, and it's been killer. And so in this one, obviously they're going to need to get the pass going as well. In terms of stretching the field, you got to find a way to do that. But to set that up, it's going to be the run game. The guys up front are going to have to get a push off the ball, get those zone blocks going, and just create space. FAU hasn't, they tried to spice things up with jet sweeps and stuff like that against Army. It didn't really work. So we'll see how they kind of come out and try to get this run game going against FIU. But if they're able to do it and get the rushing game that they've had in the past, I think it bodes well. But it's a two-faceted approach also because they're going to have to pass the ball. So really, to win the game, the offense is going to have to wake up.
Alrighty then, Robbie, thank you so much for talking shop about FAU. If you could drop your social ats to us, not just for yourself, but also for the FAU Owls Nest, so that we can see how the Owls are preparing for this game.
Yeah, no, definitely. On Twitter for Owls Nest, it's FAU_Owls_Nest. We keep the website updated, full game. It's the same thing, FAU Owls Nest. Then my personal Twitter, I try to keep on Owls Nest during the games, but I'll be posting about the game during the week. It's R La Stella Report. And that's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And all right, let's take it back to the Paws Up preview as we get towards Conference USA predictions. Alrighty then, before we get into the tail end of the preview, let's get into what you can expect around FIU athletics, who to keep an eye on in the 305. So let's dive right into it. Let's start with men's soccer. At the time of recording, they stand with an 0-3-1 record. They're going to be coming off their game against ranked UCF. We'll see if they won or lost that. Their next actual game that you can see is going to be on Sunday, September 15th, when they head to Conway to take on the Central Arkansas Bears. That's going to be at 8 o'clock on ESPN+. Their next actual home game is going to be all the way on Sunday, September the 29th, when they host Tulsa. So they're going to be on a bit of a road trip here following that UCF game, and it starts on Sunday against Central Arkansas. Now, FIU women's soccer at the time of recording stands with a 4-3 record. They're coming off a win against Southeastern Louisiana. They'll have also come off a game against SEMO, that, again, we'll see if they won or lost that. Their next game is going to be on the road at Middle Tennessee on Thursday, September the 19th at 8 o'clock Eastern. Their next home game is going to be on Thursday, October the 3rd, when they take on the New Mexico State Aggies. So, of course, best of luck to the women's and men's soccer teams for that. And then we'll briefly touch up upon volleyball indoor volleyball, to be specific. They have a 1-6 record at the time of recording. Their next upcoming game that you can watch is going to be on Saturday at 11 a.m. It's going to be during that South Carolina tournament in Columbia when they take on the Stetson Hatters. However, right after that, they'll head back home to the Ocean Maid Convocation Center to begin the 305 Challenge against Texas Tech, Arkansas, and Miami, though the Miami one will be in Coral Gables. The Texas Tech game will be on Thursday, September the 19th at 6 o'clock. So that was your look at around FIU athletics. So let's head back now and make some predictions here. Before we get into it, I have the statistics pulled up here. And again, it was kind of
Jake. I want to hear it.
Yeah. Oh no. It was a rough. Well, all right. First things first. Let me just pull up how everyone in the world of Conference USA did. And if you're a UTEP fan, I suggest you head out of here now because it's going to get ugly as far as what the Miners did in a packed house here. So let me share my screen right here. Here we go. So we begin with 2 games against ranked opponents. It was Louisville destroying Jack State 49-14. It was Ole Miss destroying Middle Tennessee 52-3. I don't think either of us are too surprised at those outcomes, Kevin, and kind of expected. FIU blew out Central Michigan. That was lovely to see. UCF took down Sam Houston 45-14. I thought it was going to be closer than what it turned out to be, but I mean, KJ Jefferson's a dog. I mean, he is such a good player, and he's killing it over there in UCF. We both wanted to see Western beat up Eastern for that uniform debacle, and they did 31-0. Not a shocker there. Louisiana beat up on Kennesaw State 34-10. The Kennesaw is still looking for their first win in FBS. Oh my God. Southern Utah walked into a 40,000 seat Sun Bowl and was the outright better team against the UTEP Miners. Yeah. I mean, I love what the coach at UTEP is doing, rallying the troops, but if this doesn't prove that UTEP's the worst team in Conference USA, I don't know what does. I mean, my God. That's just, it's not a good look for Conference USA. And then lastly, Liberty. Actually, I thought it was going to be a blowout. New Mexico State kept it close, but the Flames did end up winning 30-24 at the end. So as far as records, I went 6-2. I picked Kennesaw over Louisiana. I got that wrong. I went UTEP over Southern Utah. I got that wrong, which means Kevin ended up with a record of 7-1. He also got, I feel like all of Conference USA was bamboozled with UTEP losing to Southern Utah. So that means so far this season, if I do the math right, my overall record is 14-4, and Kevin's record is 16-2. Sucks to suck. I know.
Let's do it.
Alrighty then. Let's do this week in Conference USA as we see what the slate is right here. Pull it up. The heck is, okay, here we go. Week 3 of Conference USA starts at noon as Louisiana Tech takes on NC State. Now, I know the Wolfpack just got beat up pretty badly by Tennessee, but NC State is still a very high-quality team in the ACC. They could get ranked as the season goes by once again. I'm going to go NC State in a blowout.
Yeah, give me NC State.
I mean, not much to say. La Tech is in a really weird position. UTEP is taking on Liberty. I don't think I'm going to be picking UTEP to win another game this season. So I can't trust UTEP anymore. I'm going to take the Flames again in another blowout.
Yep. Give me the Flames.
We'll save FIU and FAU for last. Obviously, Sam Houston gets to take on Hawaii. Hawaii's not a bad team, Kevin. Hawaii's actually got a pretty solid unit. However,
Hawaii in the round table.
They have to make the trip to Houston or Huntsville. So I'm going to say Sam Houston gets the dub here.
Me too.
All right. Jack State takes on Eastern Michigan of the MAC. Now, in all honesty, I haven't done a whole lot of research on EMU, but I'm just under the impression that if Jacksonville State doesn't win a game here, when is that going to happen? When are they finally going to get that non-conference win? I mean, I still have a belief the Gamecocks are a good team, okay? But they have just had an absolutely awful start to this season. They need to get a good, solid win, and this is where I think they'll do it. I'll take Jacksonville State.
Yeah, me too. Definitely got off to a very, very tough start, and I think their non-con has been brutal, man. And I think same thing goes with Kennesaw. I mean,
yeah,
we're looking at San Jose State here, and then next week, thankfully, they have a bye.
Well, hang on. Who are you taking for that game? Jack State and
Jack
Eastern?
State.
Okay, you're taking. Okay, just wanted to make it clear there. All right. Like you mentioned, Kennesaw's taking on San Jose State. Kevin, I really want to see Kennesaw State win a game. I don't want to see them go winless, but I don't think it's going to happen here. I'm going with the Trojans.
Me too.
Or is it Trojans or Spartans? I want to say Trojans, but
it's one of the two.
Yeah, one of the two. 100 miles of hate. This isn't. I just realized this is like rivalry week in Conference USA. You have Western taking on Middle Tennessee. Sadly, I don't think it's going to be a very fun game. I'm going to take the Hilltoppers.
Me too.
All righty then. So last pick man. Yeah, I know. It's just that there's a lot of I don't know. It's weird. New Mexico State and Fresno State. I don't trust the Aggies. Fresno State's got a pretty good team, and it's a 10:30 game, so no one's watching on the East Coast. I'm going to go Fresno State.
Me too.
Oh, man. And just because I have the graphic here already lined up, let's see what the rest of the Conference USA podcast roundtable thinks. I really want to ask Ben from Fan the Flames why the hell he picked La Tech over NC State. So 700, Minor Talk, and Blue Raider podcast all have FAU. You guys suck. But aside from that, obviously Blue Raider is going to pick Middle Tennessee over Western. I mean, duh. By the way, Caleb is crazy with this. Caleb from the 700 Pelham Road, he makes some crazy upsets. He has New Mexico State over Fresno State. If he hits that, that's going to be a banger prediction from him. But c'est la vie. So, alrighty then. Now it's time to ask the big question here: who wins between FIU and FAU? Before we pick, let's see what EA Sports thinks. And I hate to say it, spoiler alert, I have some bad news. Let's check it out.
They say every game counts the same in the standings, and that is true, but there are some games that no matter what the coaches say, they just mean a little more, and they hurt a little more if you lose.
They do, and that's a fact, and every player will tell you that. There are some games that are highlighted before the season that this game matters more, and it's not that the other ones don't matter. It's just that the hate runs so deep for some of these rivalries and some of these kids that grew up across the street from each other that went to different schools, Jesse. You can feel it.
David, you're absolutely right, and I wonder, because it was a rivalry game, did the losing team get a little overhyped? It just looked like they were pressing too much in this football game. They made too many uncharacteristic mistakes. And
I have some stats pulled up here. Keywan Jenkins went 11 for 22, 115 yards, no touchdowns, and no picks. That sucks. Shamari Lawrence was the leading rusher, 20 carries. Wow, for only 69 yards, and he also fumbled the ball. Nah. And then Dean Patterson got 3 catches for 20 yards.
We move on.
We're moving on. All right. So again, the question is, who's going to win this game? Like I said at the top, maybe one of the biggest games FIU has played in years. One of the most meaningful to the rest of their season. Kevin, we'll start off with you. Tell us who's winning the game and tell us the score.
The FIU Panthers will snap the 6-game losing streak against FAU. I think FIU will win by a final score of, I want to say 21-17. I think it's a little lower scoring. Who knows if the rain is going to happen or not. And I need to do this for the gift purpose. You see this?
And we need to do that. Is that the first thing we're going to post when FIU wins? Okay.
It'll be something like this.
All righty then. I like that energy, Kevin. Here's the thing.
Oh,
I
boy.
think this is the perfect opportunity for FIU to win. They're catching the Owls with their pants down. I mean, my God, everything is pointing towards an upset except for Vegas, who still has FAU as the favorites. I think it's 5 and a hook last we checked. No, I'm not going to play around this. I think FIU is going to go in there and win it. I think FIU is going to go into Boca and get the job done. I think, Owens and Lawrence are going to have great games, and they're going to be the backbone of the offense. I think FIU's defense is more motivated than they ever have been before. And I'm not saying it's going to be another pick fest like what we saw against Central Michigan, but I think they're going to lock down FAU's offense. I'm going to say FIU wins by a score of 27-17.
Wow.
Yeah, I said it. It's listen, that offensive performance we saw against Central Michigan might be a once in a blue moon kind of thing. But I think the defense is going to be on a roll, and they're going to get the job done against a reeling FAU Owls team.
Just for the purposes, if this is a win, do it with me. 1, 2, yeah!
All right, everybody, have a good night's sleep, and I don't know, if you see us at the FAU stadium, say hi, and we'll say hi back.
Yeah.
All righty, everybody, have a good night as we start to close up shop here. It's the Panthers and the Owls from the FAU football stadium coming at you at 6 o'clock sharp. If you can't make it over, it's going to be on ESPN Plus. Kevin, I can already see Kevin. I don't know how Kevin's going to sleep tonight.
I don't know how I'm going to sleep these next couple days.
Yep. It's going to be a tough drive over there. We're probably going to carpool together. Maybe do some karaoke. Play some Pitbull bangers.
What's your music taste?
We have to just do Pitbull galore, right? I feel like we have to. Maybe throw in some other.
Maybe.
Who does FAU got? Do they got Roddy Ricch over there at FAU?
They have who was it?
Kodak Black.
Yeah.
They got. We might have to do a mix of Pitbull and Kodak. What a playlist. What a banger. But alrighty then, everybody. Get a good night's sleep. We'll see you. We'll in our Paws Up takeover. And there's just one thing left to say. Paws up.
Let's go. Paws up, baby.
Flip